Jade Thirwall got in touch and asked me to make some costumes for an event she was holding here in the Northeast. I love Jade and I was also a massive fan of Little Mix, so after fangirling for a little while I decided on making some disco heads. Now I really didn't know what I was getting myself into, but if anybody's watched me on the Great British Show and B, you'll know that I like a challenge. So first thing I did was take some mirror tiles off the base of the ball and cut a hole out the same size as my head so that the performer could get their head through it. I found some workman hard hats in a charity shop and thought they'll do perfectly because you can adjust the size. Just testing to make sure that the helmet actually fit through the hole and sitting comfortably inside the ball. I'd like the performers to be able to see, so I had to cut out a square shape out the front of the ball, saving that square shape to use later. Obviously I had to try it on at this stage to make sure I could actually see out the hole, and I can confirm I could see. It was at this point that I realised that the helmet sat too high inside the ball to be able to make you see straight out of the hole. So I took the panel that I cut out of the front and added it to the top of the helmet. Now how I did this was I put on some safety goggles and used my multi-tool to drill holes in the top of the helmet. I then set that to one side to come back to later. I'm going to use these added cable ties to secure the helmet to the inside later on. I'm going to use the original hanging balls, but I'm going to turn it round so it's pointing inside the helmet. I added some hot glue just to make sure that it wasn't going to spin round inside the helmet. Once that was set in place and dry, I then moved on to using the original bolt and adding it to the bottom of the hanging device and tightening it in place. This means that all the fixtures are on the inside of the helmet, which means when you turn it over and look, you only have the bottom of the bolt. It just makes it look pretty smooth on the outside. So this was super fiddly, so I placed the workman helmet back inside the disco ball head and fed the cable ties through the holes that I'd previously made. And that concludes all the major structural work that needs to happen inside. So the performers didn't just have their faces on show. I used this rhinestone ribbon that I found in the range, which was perfect because you could actually see straight through it. I measured how much I would need and made sure that it was covering all the raw edges, and then went back to using my trusty cable ties to get it held in place. I wasn't too concerned about the rough edges of the ribbon on the outside because I was going to go back and use the mirror tiles that I'd taken off the bottom of the disco ball and place them round the edge to cover all them hard edges. How I did this was back to my hot glue gun, just got that hot glue on the back of them and placed them round the outside edge of the ribbon. The finish line was in sight now, but the bottom of the disco ball head where I'd cut the hole for your neck was a little bit sharp, so I cut some of this silver leather red and hot glued it in place. This turned out to be a little bit more fiddly than I wanted it to be, and also my hot glue gun pumps out the same temperature as lava. Blisters on every finger, so be careful peeps. All done now, I just had to trim the excess off and get it packed up for the gig. So Jade was holding the event at her bar that she owns in South Shields, which was a great venue. We loved meeting her and she was nothing but lovely for the entire event. I know this isn't my usual sewing content, but this was how I started making props for dancers and events. The sewing came later, but this was my first love. Follow along for more.